turn my mic on here. We're continuing in our discipleship series, and one of the fastest growing white-collar crimes in America right now is actually mortgage or title fraud, where someone actually goes to the recorder of deeds and says that they've purchased such and such a property, and they basically steal your title away from you. And individuals have lost their homes because of this, and there's been quite a bit of litigation in the courts recently trying to resolve this. But everybody got their tax bills very recently. Thank you very much. But there's actually a website that you can go to, and it's called propertyfraudalert.com. And you can actually go to that site, register your property, and I think it helps you to be alerted if there's been activity trying to take your property away from you. But propertyfraudalert.com, and obviously you can call the Tazewell County office and get more information on that if you need it. But in looking at Paul's letter, one of the things that I believe he brings out to us is that there's another type of fraud or identity theft that takes place when you and I start to give our allegiance, we start to give our heart, we start to give authority to someone other than the Lord Jesus Christ. It often happens very subtly, but we begin to see that the affections of our heart maybe in certain areas have turned to something that God would never say, "Where am I?" or "How have you forgotten me?" because the actions are not bringing honor to me. Paul's highest challenge that he brought to us, I believe, comes in the book of Romans 12, verse 1. "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, on account of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." When you walked in this morning to begin to be a part of this worship service, did it dawn on you to say, "Lord, I'm here not to check a box, but I'm here to say that I love you. And yes, even though I came to Christ many years ago, by the way, my life is still yours. I'm here because I'm affirming the fact that I want you, oh God, to direct every part of not just this day, this week, but my life. No matter how many days I have left, I want you to be the one that's in charge of my choices." And I think about this verse again. Paul says to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to the Lord. And of course, we've got another word that sounds exactly like holy, but spelled very differently. Holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y. And I think, God, I'm coming to you and I'm going to give you the deed to my life. I'm going to wholly surrender everything I have, and I'm going to say, it's yours. You can ask me to do anything. You can ask me to go anywhere. You might even ask me to go to Brazil. Something crazy like that. But I want to say that, God, this life that I have to live, it's yours. It's wholly yours. But then the other word, holy, H-O-L-Y, means to be set apart, to be pure, to be godly. God knows He has our heart when our desire, our design is to be holy in speech, action. To give your whole life is really expected to be a part of our everyday spiritual worship. The problem with living sacrifices, one theologian says, is that living sacrifices tend to crawl off the altar. They're there for a moment, but then when a trial comes, maybe we shrink back and we say, God, I'm not so sure I'm willing to relinquish that today. Sometimes we ask the question, okay, God, I know I'm supposed to be holy, but if I'm making this sacrifice, which is costly for me, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this equation? If I give you everything, what's in the return box? Will I see a return on my investment? Paul recognized that the day of his departure was near as he wrote this letter to 2 Timothy. I've mentioned before, it's the last letter that Paul wrote. And he says, "For I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." Three main verbs here. I have fought, I have finished, I have kept. I have fought, I have finished, and I have kept the faith. Are you still fighting? Are you still running the race? If you're still here, you're not finished. Right? If you're still here, you're not finished. You've got some more work to do. And then he says, I have kept the faith. I've not dishonored my Lord. I've not traded in my faith card for something more temporal, more immediate gratification. I'm still holding on to what God's asked for me. And so he says, there is now in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the righteous judge will award me on that day. We're here today, May the 10th. We've marked certain momentous occasions in our lives. Robin and I celebrated an anniversary this past Friday, 44 years. Thank you, baby, for those great memories. Got to hang out with some grandkids yesterday. It's hard to get much better than that. But there is a day coming when God's going to judge how I did on my race. Was I all in? Or did I just kind of dip my toe in the water and say, oh, it's too cold for me. I don't really care to participate much more than this. God, I love you, but there's a certain participation level I'm willing to get to, but if it costs me any more than that, I'm backing out. Because I don't believe really you have the rewards to give me that will outweigh what I'm going to get by not following you today or in this moment. That's what we say. We say, I believe there's not a reward high enough for me to sacrifice what you're asking. It's hard to believe that, but it's true. But when Paul writes this, he's the one that admitted to being chief of sinners. So let's not forget, he didn't always get it right. He had a misdirection in his life as well, and God had to give him a course correction, which, praise God, he did, because 2/3 of the New Testament would not be here if he had not been redirected. God gave him a new heart and a new mind. And because Paul was so thankful for the changed life and the presence of God in his life, everything changed. He said, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Philippians 1:21. He knew where he would be very shortly in the presence of God. Paul was living in the time of the wicked Emperor Nero. He understood Nero's intentions and his hatred towards Christians. When we think of sacrifice today, we think of moms because they gave selfishly over and over again in the way that they served us. And we look forward to seeing them again. On that day, the righteous judge will award me, Paul says. We're waiting for a reward. I hope we're not waiting for an embarrassment. Do you think about that very often? I know, the older I get, I do think it helps me think about it a little bit more. Doesn't it? The older you get, the wiser you get, you do begin to realize that one day I'm going to see, if my Bible is right, I'm going to see Jesus face to face. And I don't know about you, but I want to be excited. I don't want to be embarrassed. I want to be super excited. There's a longing in our heart to always be all that we can be. And Paul's saying, I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. Some people would say, I've kept the faith in the closet. I've kept the faith kind of incognito because I don't want to be that Jesus freak kind of person. That's not what it means. It means I've kept the faith when it cost me something, like the pastor in Laos that we talked about. Stop doing what you're doing, pastor. Stop preaching the gospel. This is a communist country. Don't you get that? Live in reality. I am living in reality. I'm going to see Jesus face to face, and he's the only one I care about impressing. Not you. Not communist police. I fought the fight. I finished the race. I've kept the faith. Paul says in verse 6, for I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time of my departure is near. Drink offering is one of those Old Testament practices that we don't really talk about very much. Another word for drink offering is a libation. And so when Moses was giving the instructions to the children of Israel in Numbers chapter 15, he talked about when you come with a fellowship offering or a burnt offering or a grain offering, you will come also with a libation. And he gave certain prescriptions for what that looked like. He talked about the different quantities of wine that you would pour out at the altar. It would be for a bull, for a ram, and for a goat. It would be different quantities. And the larger the animal, the larger the quantity. And so with a bull, you would give about a quart. You would pour out about a quart of fine wine at the base of the altar. And it's a picture of us pouring out our lives before the Lord. Let me just read to you just a little bit of this passage from Numbers chapter 15. The Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, after you enter the land I am giving you as a home, and you present to the Lord food offerings from the herd or the flock as an aroma pleasing to the Lord, whether it's a burnt offering or sacrifices for special vows or freewill offerings or festival offerings, then the person who brings an offering shall present to the Lord a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of finest flour, mixed with 1/4 hin of olive oil, and with each lamb for a burnt offering or sacrifice, prepare a quarter of a hin of wine as a drink offering. These offerings were given regularly throughout the year. And Paul says, I'm reminded that my life is meant to be a living sacrifice unto the Lord. And so every day when I come to prayer in the Lord, I'm going to ask him, God, this day is yours. My life is yours. I'm going to pour out myself in service to you. I'm going to hold nothing back that is due you. Listen to Isaiah the prophet. He talks about Jesus in this regard. Isaiah 53:12. Therefore, I will divide and give him a portion with the great, kings and rulers. And he shall divide the spoils with the mighty, because he willingly poured out his life to death. This is Jesus. Because he willingly poured out his life to death and was counted among the transgressors, yet he himself bore and took away the sins of many and interceded with the Father for the transgressors. Jesus willingly poured out his life. I didn't incorporate this into the message when I was preparing it, but it hit me this morning as I was praying about the message. I pictured Jesus walking into that upper room with the Last Supper that he had with his disciples, and before he served them the meal, what act of service did he perform? Do you remember? He washed their feet. Jesus got down on his knees and poured water into a basin and lifted up their feet one by one and put it into that basin and washed them, and then dried it off with a towel. I believe that act of service was a picture of what he was also doing with his life. He was pouring it out in service to them and to us who would come after. People may not understand the theology of a sacrificial death on the cross, but they'll see a living theology when you sacrificially give of your time and your kindness to other people as you pour yourself out. And they'll recognize there's something different about their heart because they treat me in a way that others normally don't. Few points, 4 points I want to make. We're not going to spend time on each one of them. It's basically just a statement of thought. Point number 1, as long as I live, keep pouring out to honor God. As long as I live, I'm going to keep pouring myself out to honor God. Secondly, I have limited time, and it all belongs to him. He's the one that scripts my day, not me. I have limited time, and it all belongs to him. Thirdly, I stay in the fight. I finish the race with the provision of God. If you're staying in a fight, you're expending energy all the time. You're battling an opposition that doesn't want you to be obedient. So when you stay in the fight, you're going to get tired. You're going to need the provision of God to make sure that you don't drop out, that you don't walk back to your corner and throw in the towel and say, I'm done. By the way, that's what boxers have trainers and coaches in the corner. And sometimes they will say, my guy's whooped. I'm throwing in the towel. I'm not going to finish the fight. There's far too many believers that have thrown in the towel. If you're struggling to stay in the fight, don't throw in the towel and not tell anybody. When you're at that point, you've got to reach out to another person and say, I need some encouragement. I'm not handling this well. I don't want to dishonor the Lord, but I'm ready to give up. Because my prayers aren't being answered here. My circumstance here hasn't changed in 3 years. I'm ready to throw in the towel. Can you help me? You need the provision of God at that point to carry on. But one of the reasons that Paul stays in the fight is point number 4. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness. There's an eternal crown coming. I may not get the accolades or the recognition that I thought I would get from people that I trusted, but I know God sees. And God, I don't want to disappoint you, so please help me stay in the fight. I would like to receive that crown of righteousness. Listen to Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Rather, as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way in great endurance, in troubles, hardships, and calamities, in beatings, imprisonments, and riots, in labor, sleepless nights, and hunger, in purity, knowledge, patience, and kindness, in the Holy Spirit and in sincere love, in truthful speech, and in the power of God, with the weapons of righteousness in the right hand and in the left, through glory and dishonor, slander and praise. If you're going to walk out your faith, you're going to experience both of those. You're going to experience some slander, and you're going to experience some praise as well. Viewed as impostors and yet genuine, unknown and yet well known, by God anyway, dying and yet we live on, punished and yet not killed, sorrowful yet always rejoicing, poor and yet making many rich, having nothing and yet possessing everything. What you're seeing there is the dichotomy between two worlds, the temporal and the eternal. Having nothing and yet possessing everything you will ever need for joy in this life, in the presence and the sustaining joy of Jesus Christ living within us. If our sacrifice, guys, is used to point someone else, even one person, to a faith in Jesus Christ, there's no more joy. There's no riches that will ever compare with seeing them in eternity with you. Maybe you're standing in a line and they're in front of you and they're the first one to embrace Jesus ahead of you. And you know they're there by the grace of God because He used you to point them to Jesus. Is there anything better than that? What an honor to be poured out for the glory of God. What an honor. I want to close with a song